Good afternoon. Welcome to The Ambassador with me, Ambassador Susan Nganga. To our top story, former Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth has been granted bail after being arrested on charges of money laundering. The arrest followed a raid by the Financial Crimes Commission, which uncovered over $2.5 million in suspicious funds. This development comes just months after a new government audit raised questions over the accuracy of data compiled under Pravind's administration. Triza Tiango reports.
A court in Mauritius has granted bail to former Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth following his arrest on money laundering charges. Pravind was detained after a search by detectives from the Financial Crimes Commission, which led to the seizure of approximately $2.5 million from his residence and other locations. During the bail hearing, the magistrate issued strict conditions ordering Pravind not to interfere with any witnesses or potential witnesses, either directly or indirectly. He is also prohibited from discussing the case with anyone except for the authorities or the court itself. The Prime Minister's lawyer strongly denied the charges, stating that his client is not guilty of any wrongdoing. This legal development follows a series of controversies surrounding the previous government led by Pravind's administration. In November, the newly appointed Prime Minister Navin announced an audit of public finances, raising concerns over the accuracy of data compiled by the former government. The case also follows the recent detention of Mauritius' former central bank governor, who was arrested and later released on a bail after charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
Witnesses and the armed group said M23 rebels advanced into the center of Bukavu in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, meeting little resistance from government troops, as Congo accused Rwanda of ignoring calls for a ceasefire. The rebels have been seeking to seize the commercial hub since taking the city of Goma in late January. Bukavu's apparent capture deals a further blow to Kinshasa's authority in the east of the country. Peres Kigo with that report.
A crowd of civilians celebrated the arrival of M23 rebel in Bukavu city with chants and cheers. It is the second regional capital city in the Democratic Republic of Congo that the rebels have taken since early January, when they launched a lightning speed offensive on Goma in neighboring North Kivu.
Nasema tutoke ile buchafu itachukua muda, lakini pamoja na nyinyi inawezekana. Na watu wenye wanapenda desordre wanakuwa wa mingi sana, na wenye wanapenda tuwatiri wanakuwa wadogo.
M23 marched south into Bukavu on Saturday, although conflicting reports initially made it difficult to confirm the extent of its advance. Congolese soldiers and allied troops from Burundi had reportedly retreated from Bukavu military bases on Friday, the same day that M23 took control of a regional airport around 30 kilometers outside of Bukavu. Reports emerged of sporadic gunfire and the looting of the World Food Program depot and supermarkets in Bukavu. Despite the chaotic scenes, most streets of the city were actually deserted for hours as residents hid in their home from looters and the rebels. Faced with the growing risk of a regional war, the international community has stepped up its course for de-escalation and a ceasefire. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, retaliated during an African Union summit on Saturday to avoid regional escalation at all costs.
Regional escalation must be avoided at all costs. There is no military solution. The deadlock must end, the dialogue must begin, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected.
The M23 takeover of Bukavu marks a significant escalation in the conflict, sparking both celebration and fear among residents. With rising regional tension and international call for de-escalation, the situation remains volatile. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
Thank you, Paris, for that detailed report. Now, Muhsin Hendricks, recognized as the world's first openly gay imam, was tragically shot dead in South Africa over the weekend. The 57-year-old was killed on Saturday morning, February 15th, near Kibera in Eastern Cape Province. Authorities report that his vehicle was ambushed by two Marx assailants who opened fire as he traveled in the car. Police are currently investigating the incident to determine if it was a hate crime. Hendricks was a pioneering figure in the LGBTQ+ and Islamic communities, having founded the Inner Circle, a human rights organization for gay Muslims, shortly after coming out in 1996. His mosque, Masjidul Gubra, served as a safe haven for marginalized individuals within the faith. Hendricks had recently officiated a wedding for a lesbian couple shortly before his death, although this detail has yet to be confirmed. Surveillance footage shows a car blocking his vehicle before the attack occurred. Over 40 people have tragically lost their lives after an illegal gold mine collapsed in the western part of Mali. The incident occurred near Kenieba in the gold-rich Kayas region, where many people, mostly women, had entered abandoned mining pits to search for the leftover gold. The collapse is the second such disaster in recent weeks, raising serious concerns about the safety of unregulated mining activities in the country. Triza Tiango reports.
More than 40 people, mostly women, have lost their lives after an illegal gold mine collapsed in western Mali. The incident occurred in the Kayes region, an area known for its rich gold deposits. According to reports from local authorities and mining industry leaders, the victims were scavenging for gold scraps in abandoned pits left behind by industrial miners. The bodies of the victims were retrieved by rescue workers who arrived on the scene as the search for more continues. The collapse is the second deadly mining accident in Mali within a matter of weeks, as earlier in January at least 10 people died when a mining tunnel flooded. The unregulated nature of mining operations in Mali, particularly among illegal miners, has contributed to frequent and often deadly accidents. Many of the victims are women, drawn to these dangerous sites in the hope of salvaging gold to support their families. Mali is one of the world's largest gold producers, but much of the mining activities remain informal and unsafe. In addition to the economic impact, the collapse also underscores the challenges facing the country's mining sector, including concerns over environmental damage and safety. Mali's government is currently involved in a dispute over revenue sharing with Barrick Gold, one of the country's largest mining companies. Last month, the Malian government seized gold worth approximately $245 million from Barrick and issued arrest warrants for its CEO. While Barrick has stated its confidence that the issue will be resolved, the ongoing tensions highlight the broader challenges in Mali's mining sector. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
A Nigerian army jet accidentally bombed a village in Katsina State while pursuing armed gangs, resulting in the deaths of at least 6 civilians. The incident occurred on Saturday in Zaka village, Safana district, where a military jet dropped a bomb on a group of huts on the village outskirts. 6 members of a family were killed in the blast, and their remains were gathered for burial. The airstrike followed an attack by armed bandits on a police base in the area, which resulted in the deaths of 2 policemen and a vigilante. This is the latest series of deadly airstrike in northern Nigeria. In January, a military airstrike in Zamfara state killed at least 16 people after an army jet mistakenly targeted local vigilantes. In December 2023, a similar incident occurred in the Tudunbiri community where a military airstrike hit a Muslim religious gathering, killing at least 85 people, mostly women and children.
Over 80 civilians celebrating an Islamic festival were mistakenly killed.
Thank you for staying with us. We have covered some important stories today, but there is more to come.
The reason as to why I'm bringing this out is because we have to understand the trends. Because they tend to trade with what is trading. We have to be able to understand and tell our children, just because it is trading doesn't make it a trade. But let's continue this conversation online across all our social media networks. That's GBS TV Africa. Our SMS line is 21111.
How can I start the missionary school? And God was giving me the heart to start the missionary school. In 1972, my most beautiful daughter was born. I didn't raise my daughter, so God raised my daughter, so she was raised so wonderfully to work for the gospel. And so 1976, the missionary school was born. And I feel so moved that the church is moving for the gospel. The pastor lives for this.
Water remains to be the world's most precious commodity, but is the most misused. In times of drought, saving water is the only solution to making sure you have it. Don't use the shower when water is scarce. Instead, use the basin while bathing. Repair all leaking taps and pipes. Wash your car only whenever necessary. If not, use a piece of cloth to wipe it clean. Do not use the hose pipe to water your garden. Instead, use the water you clean your vegetable with to water your flowers. Do not release wastewater into rivers. Note that your downstream is someone else's upstream. Of all the waters available on Earth, only 1% is fit for human consumption. Every drop counts.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to the bulletin. Now, Sudan's ongoing conflict between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces continues to take a devastating toll on civilians, with the latest reports indicating an RSF assault on the famine-stricken Zamzang displacement camp in Darfur. This attack underscores the worsening humanitarian crisis in the region, where millions are already suffering from food shortages, displacement, and a lack of basic services. Peres Kigo with more.
Sudan's Rapid Support Forces have attacked the famine-stricken Zamzang displacement camp in Darfur, worsening an already dire humanitarian crisis as the paramilitary group seeks to tighten its grip on the region while losing ground to the army in Khartoum.
There is opposite exodus from Zamzam to Al-Fashir right now. Opposite migration from Zamzam to Al-Fashir right now. Since it started this, about the 8th attack in Al-Fashir, the death toll is up to now recorded 6 women, 8 children, 9 men, 2 organizations workers.
The Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group that emerged from the notorious Janjaweed militias, has been consolidating its power in Darfur while facing setbacks in Khartoum. Despite losing ground in the capital, the group has maintained a stronghold in western Sudan, where violence against civilians has been widely documented. Reports suggest that the attack on Zamzam camp was part of a broader strategy to assert dominance over the region, further exacerbating tensions and deepening the humanitarian disaster. Since the outbreak of war in April 2023, the conflict has displaced more than 1/5 of Sudan population and left half of the country facing severe hunger. Civilians in Darfur who have long endured cycles of ethnic violence and political instability are among the hardest hit. The international community has repeatedly called for an end to hostilities, but efforts to broker a ceasefire have largely failed, with both sides unwilling to negotiate and civilians bearing the brunt of the violence. Sudan's crisis appears far from resolution, and the humanitarian toll is only expected to worsen. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
Tragedy has struck Indian main railway station in New Delhi. At least 18 people were killed in a stampede, including 5 children, the youngest being 7 years old and the oldest person being 79. The injured were rushed to the hospital to seek medical intervention. Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Israel in his first trip to the Middle East. Here's more on the scene by Abdi Hamid Ali.
In India, a stampede tragedy seems all too familiar. Tragedy has rocked the main railway station in New Delhi, where travelers were heading to the Prayagraj for the Mahakumbh festival, a religious pilgrimage. Passengers were busy waiting to board the train. However, the available infrastructure could not withstand the influx of people who were eager to head to the pilgrimage. At least 18 people were killed in this tragedy, the youngest being 7 years old, while the eldest being 79 years old. Police and rescue workers were at the scene trying to control the congestion of people.
The crowd started pushing and people were falling over us. My wife passed away on the spot.
Stampede is a frequent incident that has happened many times in India.
2 trains had been delayed, leading to an increase of people gathered on the platforms.
Last month, 40 people were killed in another stampede that has happened in Prayagraj due to the pilgrimage. It is estimated more than 100 million people will attend this pilgrimage. Meanwhile, the ceasefire in Gaza remains. Hamas released 3 Israeli hostages and Israel released 369 Palestinian prisoners. Last week, the ceasefire was in a vulnerable state where Hamas accused Israel of violating the ceasefire agreements by refusing aid to enter Gaza and their continuation of killing civilians. Israel and US leaders gave a stern warning to Hamas that the violence will reignite in the enclave. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Israel and met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He visited the Holocaust Museum and delivered this statement.
This ancient poison, called anti-Semitism, which has plagued mankind for centuries, has visited us now again in this new century. It hides behind geopolitics. It embeds itself in international organizations, in the curriculums of our colleges and universities, in the voices of some who hide in social media and even openly espouse this ancient poison.
The question remains, how can India's limited infrastructure overcome the robust population of 1.4 billion people? Can the government mitigate such avoidable risk from occurring again? Can the ceasefire agreement in Gaza continue without any disagreements? Only time will tell. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
The French President Emmanuel Macron will host an emergency European summit and invited European leaders to discuss the Russia-Ukraine war. This comes after United States Special Envoy has said that Europe will have no role in the negotiation table to end the war. Abdi Hamid Ali brings us that report.
Divisions between Europe and the US has grown to new heights when one of the US Special Envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, said in a press conference that Europe will not have a seat at the table for the negotiation talks to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
I said I'm a school of realism. I think that's not going to happen. But I said that's one of the reasons I'm here talking to people. One of the reasons we're going out, we're doing it, to making sure that their positions are well known, that when we go into these positions, they're well stated. Because we're looking at, you can have the Ukrainians, the Russians, and clearly the Americans at the table talking.
The divisions between Europe and the US couldn't be more staggering when US Vice President J.D. Vance attacked Europe in a speech that shocked European leaders.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still, which of course brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations.
In retaliation, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius had this to say.
This democracy was called into question earlier by the U.S. Vice President for the whole of Europe. He spoke of the cancellation of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compared conditions in parts of Europe with those in authoritarian regimes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not acceptable.
Due to the tensions rising between the two continents that were allies for almost a century, French President Emmanuel Macron has called upon leaders to attend an emergency summit to talk about Ukraine and the future of European security. Contradiction in the Trump administration is evident. While the Trump's envoy to Ukraine stated Europe will not be part of the negotiation process, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated in the Munich Security Press Conference that both Ukraine and Europe will join the peace talks. Rubio will arrive in Saudi Arabia today to discuss issues relating to Gaza with Saudi leaders, while meeting with Russian officials is scheduled for tomorrow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed his dissatisfaction with Trump calling Putin and suggesting Ukraine to make concessions and give up their right to reclaim their territories under Russian occupation.
There is something at the table, but not on our table. So I didn't see any invitations, envoys, and etc. from Ukraine to meet with some other envoys, and it's something strange for me to speak in this case and this format if before we don't have any negotiation between us and our strategic partners. As I remember, Russia is not our strategic partner.
While Zelensky dismissed any proposed mineral deals with the US, he stated it did not contain any future security guarantees for Ukraine.
It's not in our interests today, not in interests of sovereign Ukraine.
Trump, being an unconventional leader, has stirred Europe into divisions and uncertainty regarding their future as Europe plans to increase their defense budget after Trump's administration stated they won't protect Europe from any future threats from Russia. But will the war that has lasted for almost 3 years come to an end? Does the division between Europe and the Trump administration signal the death of the proposed peace deal? Will Europe come up with a plan to counter threats from Russia in the future? Only time will tell. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
Thank you, Abdi, for that detailed report. Now, and that international news marks the end of our bulletin today. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, same place, same time at 1 p.m. And remember, this is The Ambassador, where we debunk global geopolitics and diplomacy. I have been your Ambassador Susan Nganga. Good afternoon.